evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our webinar about rumors and realities and hopefully some resources in the long run about the college admissions process. I am Kim Stodghill, and I'm so excited to be here tonight, joined by my amazing team of women who help guide students through this process on a daily basis. I am actually going to let each one of them introduce themselves individually, and each one of us are actually going to share our favorite tidbit of advice for this college process as part of our overall presentation tonight. So a couple of us will do that right in the beginning, and then the rest of us will kind of share as we go throughout. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. Why don't you take it away? And
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jenny Hubbard. I'm one of the college counselors as well as the essay specialist on the team. One of my passions has always been helping students with their writing. And I think one of the most important pieces of advice that I share with families, parents in particular, is to essentially let your child grapple with their essays on their own. Allow them to dig in, be self-reflective, and don't demand to read their work, particularly while they're in the middle of creating drafts. If they choose to share it with you, that is their choice, but I would definitely recommend that you allow it to be on their terms and when they're ready, if and when they want to share it with you. And that's it.
I'm Maureen Pascal, and I'm also one of the educational consultants on Kim's amazing team. My favorite part of the college application is the activity list. I spend lots of times with students doing it. It really is their place to shine and show who they are as a person. And so my best advice to you is to keep track of everything your child does in high school apart from their academics. So any volunteer stuff, summer camps, family vacations, all of their extracurricular activities, keep track of everything, because I know you think you're going to remember everything, but I promise you won't. So have a document, just keep a running list of everything that's going on, how much time they spend doing these activities, and you will be in good shape come senior year.
I want to introduce myself. My name is Claudia Malchuk, and I love what I do, but I also love working with this amazing team of women. And since no one's mentioned it yet, I also want to share that we are all educators, but first and foremost, we're all moms. And I think we can all agree that our whole approach to college counseling changed dramatically after we sent our first and second and third and fourth, however many there all are together, off to college. I've been doing college admission or college counseling work for over 20 years. But I think I was reflecting back, and my first job out of college was actually working for a small liberal arts college in northwestern, Ohio, Defiance College. Isn't that a great name for a school? And I was an admission rep. So it's kind of come full circle. I've been doing this for a long time. Love working with these women and love meeting the future and helping guide them to their perfect fit school.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melinda DeMaria, and I am thrilled that we're able to all be with you this evening. We are in places all over the United States, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as the evening goes on. I'll share my piece of advice with you in just a little bit, but as Claudia just referenced, I am one of those moms who just moved the last one out of the nest. And I have to tell you, that feels pretty good.
all right. Thanks, Melinda. Thanks, team, for being here and for just being wonderful to work with. I consider myself very lucky to have this group of women to bounce ideas off of, to share concerns with. We really have an amazing approach to how we are able to do the work that we do. When I first started this business back in the beginning of 2020, I was doing it completely solo, and having worked for nearly 25 years at that point in some type of office setting, really in an educational setting, but surrounded by people and seeing students on a regular basis, I quickly learned that I didn't love being solo all of the time. So I have been fortunate to be able to build this team over the past 5 years. And I think we bring together a variety of experiences, also some commonalities, as you've just heard, but we definitely have a variety of backgrounds that I think strengthen each of our our approaches to this process, because we can lean on each other for all of that. So let's talk about what we're here to discuss tonight. And it is what is happening in this world with college admissions. And if you're like us, who are old enough to have our children now off into college or soon to be, well, no, we are all there now. We are all done. You might know that the college process has changed a bit. If you are, again, as old as I am, back in the day when I was still typing on a typewriter and using liquid paper to make corrections, clearly things have evolved in so many ways. But beyond just those basic things like paper and mailing in your applications, some of the real challenges that have come up over the years are how much more difficult, quite frankly, it has gotten for our students out there in this world trying to get into college. The demand is high, and the number of seats has not changed dramatically across the board. And so simple laws of supply and demand obviously indicate that there are more people who want those seats than there are to go around. And so unfortunately, what we see in our business a lot of times is a lot of pressure. Our students are feeling extreme amounts of pressure to perform, anxiety about what their options are going to be, and what does that mean about them as a person. One of the things I hate to hear every year is, but I've worked so hard. And there is no doubt that most of the students we work with have actually worked really, really hard. And that still sometimes means they come up short in this process, unfortunately. So part of what I have seen happen in terms of how I have evolved as a counselor over the years has really been much more emphasis on a broader range of schools, trying to really open people's eyes to the options that are out there. And parents, quite frankly, a lot of times that means getting you all to understand that the old rules just aren't working anymore. And so we have to have a different approach and really, again, looking at a wide variety of options when it comes to that. The other things that have changed are, I find that we are doing a lot more, crisis management is a strong word because nothing about this process is a crisis, but we are doing a lot more reassuring and trying to build students up to help them understand that there are going to be options and places for them to go. I am fortunate, knock on wood, so far I have yet to have a student who did not have an acceptance, at least somewhere, because we worked together to make sure that was going to happen. Again, it wasn't that hard even when I began this career 20 years ago. It was much more about, hey, here's your list of schools. I'm pretty sure you're going to get into maybe these 4, and then maybe you're going to throw in a couple of reaches, and that's great. Now we have to be a lot more careful about how that comes together. And again, it's about building the students up and reminding them that these difficulties and these challenges about being admitted are so much less about them as a person. And we want to partner with parents that we work with as well to help you all really embrace that. And because whether we know it or not, so often the messages we send in terms of our approval or disapproval of the college list really can resonate with our kiddos. And again, as moms and as women who have done this for a really long time, our goal is to, nurture those babies instead of making them feel less than in this process. So that's not exactly the advice I'm going to give. I've got more to share later, but as parents, I hope that you'll keep that in mind too as you go through this process, whatever age and stage your student is, that, know that they are feeling a lot of pressure in most cases. Some are not. I'm not sure my boy felt a whole lot of pressure. He acted like he didn't, but I think he probably felt more than he ever let on to me in the process of applying to college. So just try to keep that in mind as we go through that. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Claudia to talk about another aspect of this process that has evolved.
Claudia, I'm so sorry to interrupt You're on mute if you don't mind starting your segment again.
I apologize. Thanks, Melinda. So what I started to do is I want to pause exactly for a second on the actual slide that's up right now. And what it says is that the college list should be reflective, intentional, and well researched. And all those things mean very certain aspects of a well-designed college search process. There's a lot of things that you can consider when you're thinking about the type of a school that's going to be a good fit. And if I could wave a magic wand in the world of college admissions, I would take away the adjective good college, good school. Because what people really mean when they say, I want to go to a good school, think about it. Most of the time, what they mean is they want to go to a well-known. Good equates with certain name recognition. So there are schools, we could collectively pretty quickly come up with a list of, I don't know, 50, 75, 100, 150 schools, very, very quick on quick order. But there are thousands of schools out there. And it's really more about fit. What's going to be a good fit for your student, your young adult? And like I said, there's so many factors to consider. So what are some of those factors? Well, if a student has a pretty clear idea of what they want to study, obviously that's one thing that's going to narrow the field because not all schools offer all majors. So if a student knows they want to go to business school, maybe they don't know if they want to major in finance versus accounting versus marketing, entrepreneurship, etc., but they feel pretty certain that business is an area that they want to pursue, then clearly that's going to be one of the defining features for when they're looking at schools. But what about if a student has no idea what they want to study, which I think is a great position to be in when you're 16, 17, 18 years old? The world is so big and there are so many opportunities out there. There are so many jobs that students have never heard of. And there are jobs being created every single day with the advent of technology and just our ever-changing world. So if a student doesn't know what major they want to pursue, that's not going to be one of their criteria. So what else do they look at? I think one of the easy things to kind of zero on for a lot of families is geography, distance from home. What's the comfort level for the student as well as mom and dad from distance from home? Some people have very clear ideas about this. A lot of people will say, I want that my child to be within a reasonable drive from home. Other people say, if it's as long as I can, it's an easy plane ride away from home. But all those are family decisions and things that should be discussed as a family. I will say though, that geographical diversity is one of the things that schools consider when they start to form an incoming class. So to look outside your immediate geographical region can give you an advantage in the admission process. There's kind of a joke within college admissions that if you're from one of the Dakotas, you can apply anywhere across the country and your application is going to get a really solid look because there's not a lot of students graduating every year from North and South Dakota. What other things? What about study abroad? Is this something that your student is interested in? There are some schools that make study abroad very available to all majors. There are all different types of study abroad. You can do it for a semester, you can do it for a year. Some schools will encourage and make available multiple study abroad experiences. There are even some schools out there that place such an emphasis on studying abroad that it's a requirement to graduate. What about extracurricular activities, clubs and organizations? Is religious life important to you? Do you want to go to a school that's religiously affiliated? Is that something that's a priority for you? What about the size of the undergraduate enrollment? A lot of students will say, I don't want to go to a small school because there's nothing happening on campus. And I can assure you that liberal arts campuses across the country, which tend to be smaller in size, know that they have to do a lot of work on programming because of the size of their school. versus a school with tens of thousands of students. The experience can be very different. You have a lot more autonomy in a large, typically public institution than you do in a school of 1,000 or 2,000 students. What's your learning style? What type of relationship do you want to develop with your professors? Do you want a professor to know your name and be aware when you miss class and maybe even call or text you and check in on you? Or again, do you want to kind of be able to recede a little bit and go and sit in a lecture hall with hundreds of students and not have that one-on-one? I think the most important thing though is when you're thinking about all these different considerations, just be honest with yourself, be true to yourself. Don't think about the person you want to develop into, but think about the student you are right now at 16, 17 years old, and what type of environment is going to best support you as you go away to college and learn to live on your own. I like to say that first of all, there's no perfect school out there. I strongly believe that there is not a perfect school. There are multiple schools that can be excellent fit for students. But I also really believe that it's more important what a student does with where they're planted than where they're actually planted. The opportunities are available to you at many different types of institutions, but it depends what you're going to do with those opportunities when you get there. And then the only other final thing I want to say is make sure your list is thoughtful. There's no sense applying to schools just for the sake of seeing if you can get in. First of all, it takes time. There's effort involved. Most schools have an application fee, upwards from $20, $30, $40, $50, $70 to $100 to just apply to the school. And just applying haphazardly to schools, if you kind of think about the premise of paying it forward, if you have actually no intention of going to a school, your application may be taking the place of another student who's really interested in that school. So just applying for the sake of applying, wish we could cut that down and narrow that focus to a list of really well-intentioned schools. There's no perfect number to apply to. That depends on your list. But I believe once you get into double digits, you're probably starting to apply to too many schools, and you might want to really reconsider what your list looks like. So I am going to pass it off to, I believe Melinda's going to speak next.
Let me be sure that I am unmuted. You would think after this amount of time, we would all have it figured out. I really wonder if I could see all of your faces that are joining us tonight. Have you ever thought about what the inside of an admissions office looks like beyond the nice front doors and the pretty brochures where there's someone throwing a frisbee, somebody playing in the snow, but what's behind? Okay, Wizard of Oz, what's behind that curtain? My image was always that it was a dark paneled room with dim lighting and a bunch of men. That was my image, and I was scared to death of it. I've yet to work in one of those type offices, but I have worked on the college side for the last 28 years, and I am here to tell you that how colleges make decisions, colleges are trying more and more to be transparent, but they are dealing with some factors that are really hard to articulate and to explain to the public. They have their hands tied in many, many ways. The admission and enrollment person has to ensure that there are enough students to keep the school going. At the end of the day, it's a business, and I realize that it's the halls of higher education and there's so much more that comes with it, but there has to be a method to the madness, if you will. Part of it is developing a class. What are we looking for? And that'll come as a directive from a board of trustees, from a president, from a university chancellor and their governing bodies, whether it's a state institution or a private institution, as well as the size of the school, be it public or private. What are we trying to develop in that class? Are there certain majors that they're trying to ensure are sustained and continued? So for some of you, You may have never heard of turf grass management or scientific illustration. Some of those you may have. At some schools, they're going to thrive more than at others. And so if we take that scientific illustration, one that you may not have heard as often about, to keep it thriving and to keep people going into that field of employment, we have to continue to cultivate a program and talk about it in our recruiting initiatives, put it in our marketing, and going out and talking with school counselors, some of which I know are joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. We're also going to look for what's going to enrich that campus community. To have a school full of a bunch of straight A students with perfect standardized test scores, I really don't think is any college's goal, because we realize it takes all types of people, regardless of how you define diversity, whether it is socioeconomic, geographic, linguistic, experiential, all of those different types of diversity really come into play when you're building a class and building a community on a college campus and their student body. Some of you here tonight are going, well, why is it that such and such a college never comes to visit my school? Well, as somebody who worked at the University of Georgia for 25 years, we never sent a rep to the Dakotas. But that was a goal. We wanted somebody from the Dakotas, just as she said a few minutes ago. We may have done things virtually, but it really didn't make a lot of financial sense with the travel dollars we had to travel to the Dakotas, or states that are even less populous than the Dakotas, particularly with a college-going population. Many of you have probably heard about the enrollment cliff. We are in the midst of it, where there have been lower birth rates, and so there are fewer students going to college at that point in time, graduating from high school. So all of the colleges are trying to find who are going to be their next incoming freshman class to enrich their campus community. We haven't even talked about who actually applies. You know, is that student going to be academically successful on a campus? I really don't think college admissions professionals want to admit a student who they know isn't going to academically be successful. We want to find that balance between being academically successful as well as thriving in that social emotional community. How close to home, as Claudia was talking about? Is it within a driving distance, or do they need to be a plane flight away, which sometimes it's a good mix? Do they like the coast? Do they like the mountains? But kind of looking at all of those areas, where are people coming from? Are they from a rural environment? Are they in a first generation home where they are the first person to go to college in their family? Are they a legacy, meaning that they are someone who has attended and or graduated from an institution? There are also political things that come into play, whether it's a public school or a private school, a large or a small school, maybe politics at the school level about who's getting admitted. It also may go all the way to the state capitol with who's being admitted. And some of that comes down even to test scores and whether a school is using test scores or not. And I know Claudia is going to talk about that in just a moment. The bottom line is, for each of the over 4,000 colleges and universities around the country, they're making admissions decisions that vary so differently from one school to the next. Part of what we try to do is to help families navigate that, to have our relationships cultivated with those admissions professionals so that we can kind of help you see through some of that murky water and knowing who is doing what and what they're looking for in their admissions process. But sometimes it does come down to test scores. Or does it, Claudia?
Thank you, Melinda. So standardized testing, I mean, just saying the words can freak students out and their parents. I think everybody can agree, oftentimes off the record, that standardized testing is not the most efficient way to determine a student's predictability of success in college. The evils of standardized testing are vast, but it's something that has been here for a long time. And although it did go away for a short time, thanks to COVID, it has come back to some extent. And I don't know that testing will ever completely go away. However, and Melinda just mentioned over 4,000 schools across the United States. And as of this admission cycle, more than half of those are still test optional or test free. There's been a lot of information in the news recently focusing on the few colleges that have returned to testing. But a lot of schools and states, public institutions, have retained or extended their testing policies. But like I said, COVID kind of brought to light testing and whether or not, if schools could admit a class that was going to be prepared to do college level work. And the answer pretty much is yes, they can do it without standardized testing. In fact, it's interesting to note that Wake Forest, which is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, has been test optional for many years. I believe it's been 17 years. 2008, Wake Forest went test optional. And that was a big uproar in the mid 2010s when Wake went test optional. Other schools have followed suit. Most commonly, it's liberal arts schools or schools that tend to read holistically that have historically been test optional. That means that they're considering all parts of a student's application and that they don't necessarily place a greater emphasis on GPA versus the activities resume versus the essay versus testing. But let me go over a couple vocabulary words, if you will, in the area of testing, because it can get really confusing. Test considered means that an SAT or an ACT score are only one of the many factors that are considered during the admission process. Like I said, along with things like GPA, the Common App essay, or possibly supplemental essays specific to that particular school, letters of recommendation, etc. So tests are considered in addition to a lot of other factors. Then there's test free, meaning the ACT or SAT scores are not required in the application process. They're just not required. Test optional. That's an interesting one, and you almost have to read between the lines a little bit. Test optional means the applicant can choose whether or not to submit their test scores. Not submitting their test scores should not impact or hurt their chance of admission. Test optional is different, however, than test preferred. That means the colleges, exactly as it states, prefer that scores are submitted, but they are not required to do. And then there are schools that absolutely your application is incomplete without standardized test scores. And that's been a change, most notably the Florida systems, public schools in Florida, public schools in Georgia, in Tennessee are all now requiring test scores. Sometimes schools are more transparent about their test policy. Sometimes you have to read between the lines or really kind of delve in and do your homework. But if a school is test optional, you've got the option whether or not to submit your test scores. How do you know whether or not to submit them? The basic rule of thumb is if your scores fall between the middle 50%, the low and the high of who has been accepted in the previous admission cycle, then you should go ahead and submit your test scores. What about ACT versus SAT? Does it matter? Do schools prefer one test versus the other? No. The answer is no. An SAT score and an ACT score, either score can be submitted, and schools do not have a preference between the two. There is a comparison guide that will tell you what your ACT score is comparable to your SAT, so you can see which test you did better on. I recommend that all my client families, the students take both tests because the tests are different. And we can't go into all the details of what's different about the tests. The tests continue to change, but just know that there is no advantage to taking the ACT versus the SAT. Then there's the AP exams. If your student happens to have been an AP student and taken AP proctored exams and has that score, those scores can be submitted to some schools in lieu of ACT, SAT schools. Guess the bottom line in testing policy and testing recommendation is, I hate to say this, but it depends because it's so school specific. So you really have to dive in and do your homework. Again, your research, a thoughtful research in that thoughtful list of schools that you're developing. And know whether or not you need to submit your test scores, if you should, if you shouldn't. But lots of things to consider in testing. I'm going to pivot from testing and share my piece of advice with you that Maureen and Jenny already shared earlier. My piece of advice is this. As a family, decide when is a good time to talk about college. When can we know that we're going to talk about college through the process, through the application cycle? Maybe Sunday afternoons are a good time that you hold your questions to Sunday at 4, and then parents, adults who are helping and supporting students through this process, that's when you save all your questions. Don't ask questions of your student when they're held captive in the car, when you've picked them up from practice or you're driving home from a game and you start rapid fire. Have you done this? Have you done this? How's your essay going? It's overwhelming. You need to carve it out a time, save your questions for that time, and then have thoughtful conversations about it, and then put it on hold. That one piece of advice is going to make the fall a lot smoother for a lot of families. And now I think we're heading back to Melinda, right?
We are. So one of the questions I think that we all get on a regular basis, whether we're on the counseling side or on the college side, is which class is better to take? Which is the better school to attend? That's going to vary depending upon family choice, family economics, and the individual student. Where is that student going to thrive? Many of your schools may give you the option of international baccalaureate courses, advanced placement courses, honors courses, advanced courses, or dual enrollment courses. There are also other acronyms in looking at high school transcripts over my time that some schools use, and so you really have to kind of know which of those offerings are going to be afforded. The bottom line is most colleges across the country are looking to see that a student has challenged themselves to the degree that they can be successful. Let me say that again. A student needs to challenge themselves to the degree that they can be successful. I remember with my oldest daughter, and I was trying to figure what was going to be the college path, the academic course path for her to go through. And I went to a longtime person in the field that I hold high regard for. And I said, what do you think my kids should do? And the response was, well, is she good at math and science? What does she do outside of class? And then this one got me. When does your daughter go to bed at night? So that whole conversation has shifted my lens of students really do need to challenge themselves to the degree that they can be successful. And successful is having a well-balanced life for them, which is going to vary based on each of us. Is your student getting enough sleep? Are they getting a healthy diet? Are they staying hydrated? Are they able to be involved in other activities at school, beyond school? Are they enjoying the classes they're taking? If you have a student who's taken a math course and they sailed through it, got the A, then the logical thought is they need to take the next most rigorous class the next year. But you do kind of have to weigh that with what else is going on. in that particular year. Some students can't get into those more rigorous courses, be it IB or AP, because they have to have a recommendation to get into those classes. It could be that there have to be enough people who want to take the class for the course to make, so to speak. Dual enrollment isn't going to be for everybody. Some colleges are not going to take that dual enrollment credit if you're planning to use it somewhere else. It really has to be a case-by-case scenario. So why then do we see students who have full IB loads with 11 IB classes? Why do so many have 9 and plus AP courses? But yet your student's going to graduate and only have taken 4 because their school doesn't allow them to start taking APs until maybe the 11th grade. It all varies. It all depends. It has got to be a case-by-case piece. You want to be sure that your student has a good foundation in English, history, math, science, and foreign language. If they are at a certain school that requires a certain number of physical education courses or religion courses, of course you have to put those pieces in there, but really try to focus on how is the student surviving and being successful. The colleges over and over are really looking at students who are going to thrive on their campus. How are they going to respond to setbacks and challenges? Are they going to be good community members? They really don't want students who've peaked in high school, who have now burned out senior year and are really going to tank when they get on that college campus with all the independence freshman year. These are the kind of conversations we enjoy having with students and with families to help you navigate that. And part of that leads into my advice to give you is there are well-intended people in your life, be they family members, friends, they have the best of intentions, but they really can give you as a parent some damaging opinions and advice. Their experience is not necessarily going to be yours. Unless they work in a college admissions office or in college counseling, they really are not able to give a broad piece of advice. They can only tell you their experience and what their story has been. And oftentimes that can cloud what your journey is.
Thanks, everyone. I am going to wrap it up for us real quickly here. I'm actually going to start with my piece of advice because it sort of ties up a lot of what's already been discussed by my colleagues here. But my advice is you have to resist the urge to really over-engineer your child's resume, their curricular choices, all of these things that we've been touching on here tonight, even their standardized testing plan, because there is not a magic formula. There's no secret sauce to if you do exactly this, then these are the results you're going to get. We really, really strongly believe in this group that we need to meet students where they are, and that means they are going to run the gamut and across a wide spectrum of their level of abilities, their interests, what their skills are, what their strengths are, what are their areas for improvement, those kinds of things. So as a parent, try the best you can to, again, resist that urge to add on or expect that they must be doing X, Y, and Z because that's the only way, quote unquote, that they're going to get into college. So try to let them be children a little bit, even though they are grown children as they're getting older and older throughout the high school stages. But in terms of how can an IEC and specifically Stodghill Educational Consulting support your families? So first of all, I want to say very clearly that we work in partnership, not only with parents, with each other on our team, with ideally a high school counselor as well, and obviously with the student at the center of all of that. We are not here to replace any of those people. It is part of being a village that helps students get sort of across the finish line, if you will, in this process. And so some of the things that we are really proud of that we do is, we've touched on some of this too, we really help the student develop a thoughtful list of schools. We're going to really help them showcase their accomplishments and highlight their activities. The thing that Maureen actually mentioned that she loves to do. We're going to really help them articulate who they are through their essay work. And again, Jenny loves to do that. So we've really got such a good combination of all of everybody's strengths and interest on this team that our goal is really, we put all of that together to meet the individual needs of that particular student at the time. And again, we work in partnership with parents. We want to hear from you as part of the input in this process. We really insist that the students are taking the lead role, but we are here to help you understand what is going on as well in terms of this process. I'll tell you, one of the things we hear a lot, and Jenny also does our intake calls. So she's talking to a lot of parents who are calling for the first time, just they're kind of sometimes frazzled, letting it all out about this is what's happening and this is where we need the support. And oftentimes it is truly the idea of how can we help minimize the stress and the friction at home? If you are the parent of a teenager, or you have been, you probably remember that there are times when you say something that they are not going to listen to, but another trusted adult who is not their parent says the exact same thing, and suddenly it's the greatest idea you've ever heard. I do this for a living. My child did not want to work with me on writing his essay. Jenny has heard this, but I wish she was still here to hear me say it again. I immediately picked up the phone and said, Jenny, he's all yours. I can't do this. We are going to fight about it every day, and I'm not going to go down that road with him. It's not worth it to me, to be honest with you, to have that kind of back and forth about something that I knew that she could handle. I also knew that he just needed a little extra guidance and support, and he wasn't going to have it from me. So that's part of it. The other thing that we can help with a lot of students is simply staying organized. This process, because it has become so unwieldy at times, and because it is not XYZ doesn't happen for every single school that a student applies to, it can just be overwhelming for them to keep up with some of the nuances of, does this school need this from me? And then what am I supposed to do over here? Where am I sending my test scores? Now I can't remember. I need some ways to stay organized. So to be honest, we get a lot of students who just really benefit from that sort of organizational structure that we can impose for them and help them stay on track. And again, taking that pressure off of parents, because we get involved and we become the nags in this process. And we don't want that to happen for you at home. And then finally, we are also here as a big resource for parents. It is our job to keep up with all of the news and filter out the myths and the realities, and making sure that you have a trusted resource to come to verify. You hear things, I need to check this out with you. My child came home from school, said this, I need to check this out with you. That's also what we're here for, because just like I'm not going to read everything that I expect my doctor to know. We don't expect you to read up on everything that you need to know about the college admissions process. We are the experts and enjoy what we do and love working with families to help get to the other side of this and to see where the students launch, because it's really exciting to see the results that come in each spring when we're finalizing where students are going and all of those kinds of things. So that is our big overview. I want to make sure that we have some time to answer questions. It's easiest probably just to put questions into the chat, but if you really want to raise your hand, we'd be happy to unmute you and let you ask a question out loud if you have one. So we'll just give it a second for that. If anybody has anything, we're so appreciative of you being here and listening in tonight. And hopefully it was just a bit of insight into where we see sort of the state of college admissions right now. Stay tuned. We could be doing this again in 6 months and have a very different message to send. It's always amazing to me in all the years I have done this work that every year there is some slight change that I am keeping up with. And it keeps me on my toes for sure, but it has been part of what keeps me coming back, because while it is similar, it is not exactly the same year in and year out. All right, well, if there aren't any questions, then we will say goodnight. Team, thank you for being here. I know Jenny had to hop off early and go do another thing for us, actually, so appreciate you all. And thanks again to our participants. If there's anything else we can follow up on, we're gonna send a follow-up email so you have our contact information. If you have questions you'd like to ask us directly, we'd be open to that as well. So again, thanks, and everybody have a great